The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. Another episode of Anime Thursdays on the Nerdcast Empire. Although we're going to mix some anime and some pro wrestling this week on the Nerdcast Empire. And then we're going to wrap up the show talking about just a look back generally at our first 100 episodes, as this is episode 101. Here on the Nerdcast Empire. Of course, you can check out any of those previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, on Twitch, up to a point. They have so many VODs. And then, of course, on our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check us out there. Great to have you along with us this week. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, man, it is going. Yeah, we are now on the other side of 100 episodes. That's pretty wild, and you know, a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on pretty much in every area of what we cover, so kind of excited to get into it as always.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we get into here because we've got a bunch of different stuff to talk about. And for the second week in a row, we're going to lead off with Ohayocon. As it turns out, right after our podcast last week, Ohayocon decided to drop some news. We kind of got some rumblings last week that things were stirring with the Ohayocon name, and it looked like maybe we were going to have some convention news, and indeed, last Thursday they announced that Ohayocon will be taking place, at least they announced that it will be taking place, January 31st to February 2nd, 2025, and they are moving to the Dayton Convention Center in Dayton, Ohio.
Beautiful Dayton, Ohio.
Beautiful Dayton, Ohio. They have put badges on sale. You can get the cheapest price for about 4 days, and supposedly selling $1,500 per price point, although be curious to see if the 7,500 badges pre-sale go in advance. But we'll have to see how that turns out. But I guess, you know, the first thing we want to talk about is the fact that it does at least appear they're going to try to have a convention. I think there's still some healthy skepticism as to whether it will happen, what it will look like. Yeah. The Dayton Convention Center currently under renovation. So, you know, it's looks like the renovations when they're done are going to be very nice. It's going to be a very nice convention center. But I guess preliminary thoughts on the fact that they're having it at all, because again, it is October and they're planning on having this at the end of January. That is not a whole lot of lead time for this convention.
Yeah, It was starting to look like the Ohayocon announcement and convention was going to be like the AEW TV deal. They were just going to keep talking it up. And then weirdly enough, they both kind of happened about the same time as far as a concrete announcement. So I don't know what kind of odd universal connection there is there, if any. But yeah, I think, you know, you look at the comments online and there are concerns with hosting it at the Dayton Convention Center. I mean, like you mentioned, the big renovations that are going on. They say there really aren't any connected hotels. There are limited dining options. There are people even saying that if you even take all of the lodging options in Dayton, that's still short of what their goal is, you know, all the tiered pricing adding up to like 7,500 people. That's you're not going to get there. Clearly they know that the attendance was down in 2024, even though we don't really have a number on that. They certainly don't expect as many people this time around. I just kind of wonder what the plan is for this year, for 2025 and moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of the speculation as to what the plan might be. I mean, clearly they're going to run a smaller convention. There's just no other way around that with the move to Dayton. Like you said, the big one is no connecting hotels. I mean, they're all a good little distance away, and we're talking the dead of winter at the end of January. Yeah. So that is not a situation, even if it is a completely safe area, which is also kind of something that's up for debate.
I watch NXT. You can just get attacked in the parking lot like Trey Miguel did. You never know.
That's very true. But it's not an ideal time to be walking from a hotel. And I think people do underestimate the amount of hotel real estate there is in downtown Columbus. And they've added to it ever since we've been going up there. It really was mainly like the Hyatt and some other connected hotels like the Drury. But now you have a giant Hilton that's attached and a couple other hotels that are actually within walking distance. And obviously they build all that up with the thought of hosting big events at the arena, of hosting big conventions at the convention center. And it's clearly has worked out. The Greater Columbus Convention Center and Visitors Bureau have done a fantastic job bringing big events to the capital city. Dayton, obviously, I think we'll probably never know the 100% story behind all this. I think there's a very logical conclusion that can be drawn that maybe they either didn't have the date soon enough with the Greater Columbus Convention Center and the Hyatt that date was no longer available, and therefore they had to find any place that would take them. I know there's some online speculation, and again, this is just speculation. We don't have any concrete evidence to back this up, but there are certainly some concerns that maybe money is owed to the Greater Columbus Convention Center or the Hyatt that they have not paid, and therefore can't go back there, that's not an option for them. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And again, we may never know what the truth is to that situation.
I think we also don't know how many attendees do you really need to make the Greater Columbus Convention Center even a viable option?
It's a great question. And again, the first Ohayocon we went to in 2007 was by and large in the Hyatt. There was the upstairs ballrooms, I think, were used for the dealer room, but there really were no panels outside of the Hyatt Regency. And I would think that based on the attendance that they would be looking at, that would be a reasonable option if they were able to actually go back to the Hyatt. And that's where you wonder.
Well, I wonder, too, how many attendees was Matsuricon getting when they made the move to the Hyatt and the convention center from where they used to run?
Correct. And, of course, Matsuricon, which we just attended a few weeks ago, does use convention center space. Now, probably more so than ever, I think, this year. They're definitely expanding that direction, which makes a ton of sense. But, again, the speculation, you start putting one and one together, and it kind of adds up that, maybe there are some bridges burnt for some reason where that's not an option. And then, of course, there's the wild speculation that, hey, Ohiocon's going to kind of look to maybe move out of Ohio altogether even in the future, possibly to Northern Kentucky. Going to have to change the name. Can't be Ohayocon if you're not in Ohio, I wouldn't think. But, again, it's just the whole thing is a shame. And this goes back, if you haven't listened to our episode kind of talking about the rise and fall of Ohayocon, I encourage you to listen to it, because the one thing that, actually two things, I guess, that we always want to make clear when we talk about this. Number one, we don't really have a dog in the fight. Like, I don't know any of these people personally. I have no idea, where the truth lies between what one side says and what the other side says. Usually it's in the middle somewhere, and you never really find out where that line is. But the one thing I will say definitively is that Ohayocon in recent years hasn't been very enjoyable. It hasn't had a lot of programming that interests me, and I don't think that they care. I don't think that was overly important. They kind of wanted to do their own thing. So when you see the current leadership getting vilified, it's hard not to believe that at least some of that is true, because, again, the con hasn't been very good. And it's still sad from a standpoint, as I mentioned on that podcast we talked about. I'm not sad necessarily for the people who are involved in it, or even that the convention's going away. I'm sad because it was our first convention. It's more of the theory and the feeling of Ohayocon rather than the actual convention itself. And unfortunately, that's never coming back. Like that, even if they rebound from this and continue to put on a convention, I don't think it's ever going to feel like Ohayocon felt those first few years that we went. And that's kind of been replaced by Animazement, which is a lot less convenient to get to.
Especially now.
Certainly our thoughts and prayers with the people down in the Carolinas that had to deal with the disaster there. Hopefully everybody's okay and they get that rebuilt.
You just think what we dealt with the wind and the rain, and think, just magnify that. Like, I can't imagine.
And the mountains, obviously, which make it far worse. But again, it's just, again, we don't really have any say in it. We're going to kind of find out, because obviously Sakai Guild continuing their thing to kind of branch off, and a lot of things being thrown around one side to the other, and you see comments on Facebook that are on both sides of the fence on that, blaming the other side for whatever. But it's just, the whole thing is sad that it's coming to this, and it feels like the announcement of Ohayocon moving to Dayton, while it should be, the fact that they're having it, in theory, should be a positive, it feels like a giant negative.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of to your point about not having a dog in the fight, so to speak, I'm perfectly willing to believe that at times both sides of this dispute maybe aren't the easiest to work with. I don't know that for sure. Again, I don't know these people personally, but when you're talking about people who have in their minds what their idea of what a convention looks like, and neither side wants to really budge or acquiesce to the other side, this seems like something that probably should have broke off a few years back and probably festered a little longer than it should have. Going back to Ohayocon here, the Dayton Convention Center, the pricing tiers I find a little questionable. I just think if you're going to offer that lowest pricing tier, you still, especially given what happened in 2024, you have to give people an incentive to want to pre-register. And I think not announcing any guests and just saying, hey, we have this convention space that has this cool theater attached to it that we think better suits what we're looking to do. That doesn't make me want to jump in and go ahead and throw money at this.
No, not at all. And I think we have talked about it, that we potentially could end up going because from a journalistic standpoint, we kind of want to see what it ends up being. Dayton makes it a little less intriguing to want to go because, again, it's not convenient. The hotel situation is not convenient.
It feels like a one-day trip.
It does. It feels like we would just stay at home and drive up one day on Saturday or Sunday and just see what it looks like, which is sad. But, that's kind of where it is. So, again, it's going to be an ongoing thing. I'll be curious to see if we start getting an idea of what attendance is going to look like, what guests are going to be coming, because that's another big step. It'll be interesting. And, again, I'm not wishing ill will upon anybody, again, but something's got to change for Ohayocon going in a positive direction. Otherwise, I don't know how much longer it's going to be around. So
yeah,
we'll kind of see how that goes. On the other side, we mentioned Sekai Guild, so it's worth mentioning that Izakaya has continued to thrive, it appears, up in Dayton. We, of course, went up there, Mall of Fairfield Commons. We're going to hopefully go back up again real soon to check them out. But a couple of things going on. They've got a new menu, which really looks good, and they continue to kind of expand what they're doing. More events. They've got the car rally coming up. The Tasha, is that it?
Yeah.
Car rally coming up this weekend. And they've got a collaboration event that will be with Sekai Guild coming up here soon as well. So, I think with Ohayocon coming to Dayton, this almost feels like a very deliberate flag in the ground, if you will. And we kind of already knew because we already saw Sekaicon and Sekai Guild run events at the mall at Fairfield Commons. But this definitely feels like a pretty definitive statement as to what side of this battle, if you will, Izakaya lands on. It's going to be with the new convention and the people that broke away.
Yeah, I've never spent large portions of time trying to think of how I would establish an anime convention and how I'd want to build that from the ground up. But if I did, I think a lot of the steps that we've seen Sekai Guild take are kind of what you would do. You start back kind of with the establishment of their Discord where it's like, hey, we're totally us now. We're not talking about the past or anything else going on. We're building our own community. You have, back in spring, you had the anime day at Beaver Creek at the Mall of Fairfield Commons, which you mentioned as far as kind of teaming up with Izakaya as well as the Suncoast and FYE there, and Nani I think was another one. But just kind of partnering with these local businesses, saying, hey, we want to kind of further build the anime community here, all leading up to what will eventually be an annual convention, which they then announced that they are going to have their Sekaicon. But yeah, I just you're seeing even more now where Izakaya is liking the posts that Sekai Guild is putting on Facebook and vice versa. You have Izakaya partnering up for this rave that they're going to be doing, the Izakaya cosplay rave, Saturday, October 19th. You have, obviously it's going to be at Izakaya. You have them partnering with Sekaicon as well as Obi-Wan Shinobi, who I believe is the DJ for that. But yeah, just all these events that are going on that Sekaicon is kind of making themselves part of. It just, to me, it seemed from day one that they've been interested in kind of growing the community as opposed to just hosting an annual convention. And I think that's what you want to see.
Yeah, totally agree. And what's interesting to me is the Ohayocon news actually kind of answered one of my other questions, because when I saw this relationship building, I really thought, okay, maybe Sakai Guild is planning on running this convention in Dayton
Yeah.
because they were kind of laying the groundwork. But then you see what the infrastructure in the area looks like with the Dayton Convention Center, and you just think, okay, now I see why they didn't do that, because clearly that's not the most ideal place to run a convention. So, I kind of get why they decided to go east of Columbus for this convention, but yeah, they're laying the groundwork. They built relationships there, and my guess is those are going to continue, maybe outside of Dayton as well, and we're going to see that continue to grow. And again, as we've said before, there are questions about these guys as well. Like, what kind of con are they going to put on?
We don't know yet.
We don't know.
Yeah.
What kind of guests are they going to have? What kind of events are they going to have? But like you said, everything they've done up to this point seems like they've got the right plan here. So it leaves you optimistic that whatever we're going to get from Sakai Guild and Sekaicon is going to be something that's going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to support the anime community, and it's going to be something that people are going to want to drive a little ways to go attend, because it certainly will be a little more of a drive for us. But
another thing I thought would be kind of interesting, and this is kind of in relation to their anime day they ran at the mall earlier this spring, is what if they did maybe 3 micro events that then kind of fed into the annual convention, but do it in a way where you have like maybe AMV contests, cosplay contests, card games, tabletop, video games, basically have like satellite tournaments for those that then ultimately feed into what will be kind of the grand championship of all those categories within your main annual show.
It make a lot of sense. I mean, again, it's just another way to build a following and get people interested in your convention, and then also maybe you could give away passes to your convention to people who win those, and also entries into your main competition. So it's another way to boost your attendance as well. Yeah, I think that would make a ton of sense. And again, ideas have been really good so far, so I'm really interested to see what they do. And again, everybody, if you're a fan of Japanese cuisine, anime-themed foods, they've added some Korean-based food. They've had some Korean-based foods with their Korean dogs.
Corn dogs. They've added ramen now. You can get late-night ramen, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights, tonkotsu and miso ramen. They have... What else have they included? Well, you mentioned the happy hour prices. That now includes their rice bowls and the Korean corn dogs in that happy hour pricing, which is kind of cool, Monday through Friday, 11 to 6. But yeah, I feel like every week or so, you're seeing some new Japanese beer or alcoholic beverage that they've added to the menu. They're really building this thing out, and it's really exciting to see.
Yeah, it's glad to see that it must be doing well enough for them to continue to expand their events. And of course, they still have their karaoke nights or movie nights. You can go on their website, which is izakaya.moe.
And they announced a licensee for the movie nights, so they can actually show licensed shows and movies. That's really exciting too.
Yeah, so again, they're really knocking it out of the park, and it does seem like there's a bond there between them and Sakai Guild and Sekaicon. So again, going to be interesting to see how that continues as things play out. We're going to pivot now from anime news. Before we do that, let's talk about our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to our previous episodes of our podcast. You can check out our store while you're there. Reminder, coming up on Sunday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, is another episode of Music Weekly. We are on to the music of September the 20th?
Yes.
Yes. That'll be coming up on Sunday. Looks like a really good week of music.
Big week. Big week.
So really excited for that. Make sure you join us Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on the Nerdcast Empire. Next week, TBA on schedule. I have soccer next Thursday night, so we may move it up. We may take a week's hiatus from the anime episode. Check your local listings. I should be able to let you know by Sunday night's episode what our plans are for next week. We're going to pivot a little bit from anime on this Anime Thursday and talk pro wrestling. And obviously a couple of big news and notes this week. You mentioned already the AEW television deal. Seems like a really good deal for AEW. They're getting a big increase from Warner Brothers Discovery. They're getting Dynamite and Collision are going to be streamed on Max in addition to their current home. They're going to be putting premium live events, pay-per-view events on Max as well for an additional fee. Also looks like they're going to be bidding out a new show on Fox or a Fox network coming up, which has not been announced officially yet. But again, a big news. It's going to have big effects on the wrestling industry for sure. The news that we're a little more interested in, because we don't really follow AEW very closely, is the premiere of NXT on CW this week, and it did very, very well, especially up against the vice presidential debate, which drew 43 million viewers that same night, and you could see it in the ratings. But NXT on CW did almost 900,000 viewers on average, and 4 of the quarter hours, the 8:15, 8:30, 8:45, and 9 o'clock quarter hours, all well over 900,000 viewers. It did tail off at the end, but that did coincide with the vice presidential debate starting. Did bounce back up to 8:43 for the final quarter hour, which was Ethan Page versus Trick Williams, and the post match. This is interesting because, there was nothing wrong with this episode of NXT.
No,
perfectly fine. First hour was clearly front loaded. Clearly, I think on purpose to some degree. Because obviously you had Roxanne Perez and Julia, which was a really great match. And, of course, they gave Julia the out of her getting attacked by Cora Jade so that Roxanne Perez could retain. You had the street fight between Zachary Wentz and Wes Lee, which was a lot of fun. Really good stuff there, so definitely enjoyed that. Some backstage stuff, obviously setting up the tag team title match for next week. Then we got Obafemi, Tony D'Angelo in the ring with The Miz. That did a really good quarter hour. A couple other matches in the last hour, and then, of course, leading into the title match at the end. The two things that are really noticeable, and obviously the ratings were great, and I think next week with no heavy competition, it would not surprise me to see them approach 1 million viewers. Number one, it's network TV, so no overrun. That's kind of sucks because NXT has had an overrun pretty consistently for a while.
Yeah.
You kind of miss those extra 8 minutes because NXT has always been a show that's made the most of every minute. And number two, and I've not seen this confirmed anywhere, it's just a feeling, there were a ton of commercials. Yeah. And I know that's part of the deal, and you just have to kind of get used to it, but it just felt like the flow of the show was really choppy because of it. But overall, great episode, and I think it was basically like a little premium live event because that's what they wanted to do for these road shows. I think in a couple weeks will really be more telling when they get back in the Performance Center and we kind of see them get back to the formula that's made NXT so entertaining. But your thoughts? Like I said, overall, I thought it was a good show, but it didn't blow me away. But I don't want people to see that as a criticism as much as it tells you the standard NXT's been running at. That I was like, oh, that's good, but I was kind of expecting more, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's difficult when you're someone who really enjoys weekly NXT because this was going to be different, both being on the road and then also being the premiere on a network station where they were going to kind of switch things up and kind of make it feel more like a big deal, which they did, and that's fine. But when you enjoy what they usually do, you're kind of like, oh, that's cool, whatever. I think the show was pretty front loaded, both the women's title match and the street fight with the Rascals. Both the highlights for me of the night. The main event was fine. I thought the ending felt like maybe they had to rush through it. It seemed a little wonky there, but kind of curious to see what's next for both Trick and then also Paige coming off of that. And yeah, like you said, it'll be interesting to see moving forward what the ratings look like, both the show in St. Louis and then when they're back home, essentially. Will they be able to keep that excitement up? Will they actually maybe even build an audience from here? Who's to say?
Yeah, and obviously it was like the highest rated show on the CW this entire year by a large margin. It did a .26 in the demo.
I saw the commercials during NXT. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like a channel geared toward people our age, to be honest with you. I mean, bringing back Scrabble and Trivial Pursuit feels definitely like we're at the bottom of the age bracket that this network is catering to. Now, I will say, you did see a lot of commercials for their Saturday sports stuff with college football and the NASCAR, what used to be the Busch Series, the secondary series.
And you do have like the DC shows, like Superman and Lois or whatever it was. I don't know what age bracket that pulls in, but it's something.
Clearly not the young people because NXT, like I said, really smashed the demo record for the year. And again, they said the CW execs obviously were very excited about that, and I think they'll continue to be excited.
You could tell they were in the crowd.
They were so excited. But yeah, I think it's going to continue to do well. There's a lot of rumors that the AEW show added may go to Tuesday night, so we may end up with a head-to-head there, which is interesting. because again, it's that
It just still feels like the billionaire wants to pick on like his rival's little kid brother when
yeah.
like you're gonna celebrate competition against NXT. Meanwhile, Raw and SmackDown are off way beyond you.
I just, with the talent WWE has, I just think Tony needs to be careful because all it would take is for Triple H to go to, the TKO people and say, hey, what if we run a show on Wednesdays on NBC?
Yeah.
And we bring, we basically rotate our big stars on this show every Wednesday night. And, that would be all it would take to just crater ratings that are already cratering. Because, again, under 700,000 this week.
Dynamite looked rough ratings-wise. But looking at the quarters, what makes you want to tune into that? It looked like they had a little bit of a bump there. Which quarter was that? 9:30 to 9:45? Is that Christian making people watch?
But again, that overrun killed their rating.
They tank in the overrun. It's amazing.
They started at 642 for that last quarter hour, and then 596, 574 in the last minute of the show was 561. I don't understand. Again, that's Bryan Danielson and Kazuchika Okada. Bryan Danielson, by all rights, one of the best professional wrestlers on the planet, even at this point.
One of their biggest stars.
One of their biggest stars against Kazuchika Okada, who, while not a household name maybe to the casual wrestling fan, certainly the sickos that they book for, that's a god in their eyes. And the ratings were terrible for it. I just don't understand where their audience is going.
It's sad. That match 8 years ago would have been something I would see. It was must see for me. But now I can't be bothered.
Yeah. And unfortunately, maybe more importantly, their audience can't be bothered.
Yeah.
And that's a concern. But again, they've made their money. They got their big contracts. So all is well in AEW land, at least to some degree at this point. But
it's also interesting when you compare the two, Dynamite with NXT, when you look at how the numbers trend. It's AEW doesn't get any better than what their lead-in gives them.
Yeah.
Whereas NXT, their lead-in isn't doing them any favors.
Supposedly their lead-in was news or something not...
One of those weird fake news shows that you see commercials for.
Yeah, so people were complaining in the Discord, or not Discord, in Reddit about whatever the lead-in was being really terrible. So, and obviously Dynamite's had a benefit of a very strong lead-in for a long time. And, but
just
again...
One other thing to mention about NXT this week, they very noticeably changed the logo up, which I think for NXT more so than any wrestling program, the logo and the color scheme always becomes a topic of discussion. It's you had the black and gold era, you had the 2.0 era where everything was colorful, and say what you want about that. And then now you have this new black and silver NXT. You have new men's and women's title belts, which may be a little boring, but definitely looks maybe more serious than the 2.0s did.
Yeah.
You have an influx of free agents coming in, which seems like a bit of a change from the 2.0 era. It's interesting how they're going to blend the high-profile free agents with your NIL people and what that's ultimately gonna produce.
Yeah, it's fascinating, honestly, to see how it all works out. And again, you mentioned free agents coming in. Of course, we got the vignette for Delta, whatever her name's going to be. Maybe she'll keep Delta.
Gamma,
who knows?
maybe. I don't know.
But she's going to be there, presumably Halloween Havoc, it looks like, when she'll be making her debut. So, yeah, the talent keeps rolling. And, of course, there's, seems to be a pretty confident belief that the Motor City Machine Guns are signed to NXT, and you would have to think if that's the case, then St. Louis next week after the tag title match is a pretty good place for them to show up. Obviously, the Lucha Brothers were potentially headed to WWE. That is certainly, at the very least, on hold at the moment for whatever their situation is. But, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time, and I think NXT, still a lot of surprises, I think, to come that people are going to be really excited about. And again, that's the one show where the surprises don't let you down. They seem to be good, and they seem to do something with those people for more than a couple weeks after they show up, which is not really something AEW is known for. So that's NXT on CW. Overall, very positive. Really curious to see what the show looks like in a couple of weeks. We'll kind of revisit this in a couple of weeks to kind of see where it has gone to and how it kind of develops. Let's talk quickly about WWE Bad Blood. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depending on how you look at it, I've got soccer broadcast this Saturday, so we will not have a post-premium live event podcast. So we did just kind of want to briefly touch on this event. It's a very interesting event. 5 matches. Again, this will be in Atlanta, Georgia. Looks like, at least unless something changes between now and Saturday, it'll be CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre and Hell in a Cell to open the event, with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns versus the Bloodline, which is Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, closing the event. A lot of rumors about who could be showing up, what's going to end that show. The other matches are Nia Jax and Bayley for the Women's Championship, Damian Priest versus Finn Balor in a grudge match, and Liv Morgan against Rhea Ripley in a Women's World Championship match with Dominic Mysterio suspended above the ring in a shark cage. You know, both women's matches have been very well built up. I think that's a great sign that they're not just tack-ons to this event, that people will be excited to see them. Priest and Balor will be good for sure, and presumably will be a little bit of storyline, probably in addition to a match that we'll see kind of where this storyline goes. But, I mean, everybody's going to be talking about the first match and the last match. And let's talk about the first match first. Punk and McIntyre, Hell in a Cell. It's been one of the best feuds in WWE in a long, long time. These guys both deserve a ton of credit for the way they have built this and the way WWE has kind of given them the freedom to do the things they need to do and say what they need to say to really make it feel real. And then presumably it'll come to an end at Bad Blood. And honestly, I'm excited to go back and watch the match after it happens because I think it could be an all-time classic.
Yeah, you know, there was a period of time where you wondered if WWE could possibly build a feud without relying on the Bloodline as being the foundation of it, because it felt like that was booked so well and went on so long because of that. How can they do that with two guys who don't have an extensive family rivalry or anything of that nature? And then, you know, enter the returning CM Punk. This has been an amazing feud, even though if at times it felt like they were fighting about a bracelet. The prop is what it is, but what they were doing around it still has been amazing to me. I'm kind of curious what we're going to be talking about with these two guys come the end of the year, moving into Royal Rumble season. Like, will we eventually see Punk with another title run? Who knows? It's crazy to think there was a point in time where we were really concerned if McIntyre would re-sign.
Yeah.
And even at that point in time, it was like, well, if he does re-sign, he's got this feud with Punk. Like, why would you want to not follow through with that? And I feel like he made a pretty good decision. And as far as CM Punk goes, it's amazing. And outside of wrestling, even like other industries, sometimes management makes all the difference, man. Yeah. Like, you can have a guy who is looked at as locker room cancer or, you know, office cancer, but with the right leadership in place, or maybe more importantly, not the wrong leadership in place, that person could be a model employee. And up to this point, Punk's return and this run with WWE has been nothing but model citizen Punk.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously he was just on NXT this week as a special guest referee. And the thing is he kind of set up potentially something with Ethan Page on NXT. Now, I don't know whether he'll be able to go to do that because obviously I'm sure they have something else planned for him after the McIntyre thing, but who knows? I mean, it's October. Probably maybe don't have anything for him for a month or two. Well, what about a quick trip to NXT to do a quick feud with Ethan Page? Yeah. Like, that would be interesting there. You know, there's a great podcast that was released the last couple of days. I've seen clips of it on Reddit, so you should definitely go and search it and check it out with CM Punk. And talking about his debut night, talking about how they kept him hidden away, how basically he was in Triple H's locker room and they were still finalizing his contract. And you know, he said, you know, they brought him down in a freight elevator and was like, you know, I know this building like the back of my hand. And I was like, the stairs are right around the corner, but they're bringing me down the freight elevator. And he said he could hear them yelling, like, clear the hallway. And he's like, oh, man, people are going to be mad. And of course, he walks out the gorilla, and he said the first person to come hug him from behind is Bayley. Like, I knew it. I knew when they said clear the hallway that it was you. But I also talked about in that podcast the reason for the use of the new version of Cult of Personality was because basically it allows them to pay the band directly and not the record label.
Okay.
So, and he said it was an interesting conversation with Corey Glover because he was trying to get Corey Glover to let WWE license the song without telling him that he was coming back to WWE. So Punk just kept saying, like, you know, you really should let them do this. Like, it'd be a good idea if you let them license Cult of Personality. And, you know, Corey Glover kept saying, hey, if it's not for you, we're not going to do it. And it was just like this ongoing, like...
Why would I be asking if it wasn't for me?
Right. So, you know, that's pretty funny, too. It
That's
kind of
amazing.
ties in, you know, everything last couple weeks.
Everything's connected.
It really is. But, yeah, I mean, Punk's been amazing. Obviously, there's a big future for him in WWE. AEW misses him. I don't think there's any question about that because everything he did made sense and everything he did drew eyeballs.
I think it's not having him on your program is one thing, but the way it ended and felt like he basically was fired upward back into WWE, that reflects negatively on your company. You feel like whatever your show was actually beneath him this whole time. And that's a greater loss than just not having him on weekly TV.
Well, and you talk about good management, but honestly, the way it all went down in AEW probably set the tone for him, too, to think, hey, this is my last chance to be with a major company, and I'm going to get a chance to go home, and I'm going to get a chance to work for somebody that has the same vision that I do about wrestling. And he's also come in, and because of that, has, I think, maybe been a model employee because like he kind of sees it as, hey, I'm going to stick it to AEW by coming in here and doing the right things and playing ball, and I'm going to show up in NXT, and I'm going to see all these young wrestlers like asking him for advice, all the stuff that he was critical of in AEW, and it's been wonderful. And McIntyre is amazing. Like, that guy could be the most over baby face, but he's embraced this psychopath heel role to a T, and this doesn't work if he doesn't do that. And you talk about where these guys are going to be, like, you know, there's still somewhere down the line a feud between Punk and Rollins.
Yeah.
That is money, and it's out there. Obviously, Rollins and Bronson Reed are clearly going to come first. McIntyre, probably a lot of places he could go, maybe into the world title picture. You know, maybe you run him and Gunther potentially.
That, yeah.
Of course, he has some issues with Rollins. So, I mean, there's also that issue. So, a lot of good stuff, and really excited for that.
One thing I think WWE's done pretty well, and in a way you kind of see it with The Miz this past week, where you have these guys who ultimately are heels, but you don't blame them.
Yeah.
Like, McIntyre has every right to be the bitter, angry guy that he is. Like, you can't really fault him, and what they've done with The Miz attacking R-Truth this past week kind of felt the same way. Like, man, this dude has had to put up with all this nonsense. Like, I get it. I totally understand.
But again, that's the biggest strength of WWE in this last year or two is storytelling. Like, things make sense. And when you need to have, I mean, for a while, Kevin Owens was the only character on WWE television who tried to make sense of everything that he didn't.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's across the board. Even like Cora Jade coming to Roxanne Perez's benefit, basically saying like kind of the enemy of my enemy sort of thing. And that, you know, I like the person you've become and maybe we can work together, without them like hugging and embracing and just forgetting all of the stuff that happened with them. And that's the other thing, too, is, you know, you could have that string along for a little bit and then have Roxanne Perez attack Cora Jade and say, hey, you did this to me, I'm doing this too. Now you got Cora Jade as a babyface. And now...
You could go either way. I mean, you could just redo Cora Jade attacking her again like you're an idiot. Why would you fall for that again?
So, yeah, I mean, there's... Logic is so much more prevalent right now, and because of that, the characters are believable. Bad guys should be believable. You should understand why they're bad and why they want to do bad things. It's not just about being evil and being a foil for the babyface. It's about their character having some sort of logical backing. So.
Well, I think the New Day, what they're doing with that's another example of that, where it's clearly they're running this direction with Xavier Woods, but they're doing it slowly and in like more interesting ways than what they used to, where it's, you know, he wrestles Rey Mysterio and accidentally pulls his mask off and gets the win. Whoops, sorry guys. Like, they're just deciding to take the more creative route, and even if that means you're slow playing it, it's more enjoyable for the viewer.
It is, because again, you start to relate to even the bad guy. It's like, well, yeah, of course he would be that way. You get all the frustration, and at the same time, they always have the Big E card in the back. If for some reason he gets cleared at some point, you always have him potentially coming in to mend the fences, bring the unit back together. So it's just brilliant storytelling right now, which makes the shows all so much more enjoyable, which leads you into the main event with Cody and Roman with the great big cinematic piece they did at Georgia Tech, which was really well done. Against Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, again, a lot of rumors about who might come back at the end of the event. You know, Cody said there's going to be a video played during the event that's going to make sense as far as the title picture at Crown Jewel. So I don't know if they're setting up maybe a tournament or what it might be. But, you know, this storyline is, I'm more interested in the Cody Roman side of it because you have Cody who basically says, I don't like you, but we're going to coexist because it's in my best interest. But you have, you know, Kevin Owens doesn't forgive Roman Reigns, and Randy Orton doesn't necessarily forgive Roman Reigns. They want to trust Cody's in his judgment.
But they're looking at him kind of side-eyed, like, why in the world would you team with this guy? This guy's made our life miserable for 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, slow play. Yeah. Don't just come back and make everybody happy and just move on, because that's what they would do in old WWE. Now we're building to something. And, of course, we still haven't had Paul Heyman back on television. Obviously, The Rock is looming somewhere. Before long, we're going to see him back on TV, I would think. So a lot of different ways they can go with this. I kind of still hate that the Hell in a Cell match is getting second billing because of it, but I also understand that they have big plans for this, and we're clearly building to War Games in one fashion or another.
Yeah.
This, I would presume, is going to be a big step in that direction, one way or the other, coming up this week. So that'll be coming up 6 o'clock Eastern time for Bad Blood.
Special start time.
Special start time to try to avoid the UFC pay-per-view, which is later that night. Unfortunately, in this one case, the special start time works against me. Makes it so I won't get to watch any of it live. But looking forward to catching a little bit later on. Should be really interesting. Last thing on the agenda for today is kind of an open topic. And I know we've talked and we've done some research, but just some kind of general thoughts and maybe some specific thoughts on the Nerdcast Empire 100. We reached our 100th episode on Sunday. You know, as I mentioned on Sunday's episode, the average podcast lasts 7 episodes. We've obviously gone way past that. But I understand why the average podcast lasts 7 episodes, because it does take a lot of work. I know sometimes it might not seem that way. Sometimes it might feel like we just flip on Twitch and jump on here and yap for an hour, and then we call it a day. But a lot of work, a lot of research goes in, especially to our music episodes. They do take some time. The work makes the end product easier to produce,
and to create.
Yeah.
As far as the actual act of speaking on the topics. Without that research, it would be a mess.
Yeah. And it's the one thing I always tell people about sports broadcasting is a lot of people think anybody could do it, but when you actually sit down and look at the amount of research that goes into doing a soccer game or a volleyball match or something like that, it's a lot. And, you know, you can do without some of that research, but viewers are going to know. They can tell.
How does that change at the highest level? I mean, does Jim Nantz just have people feeding him stuff where he's not the one doing the research? How does that work?
It's a combination of things. Those guys do their research, but they also have research assistants who do a lot of the work. Of course, like in NFL games, you'll also have NFL PR people who will put together, both from the individual teams and the league, that will put together talking points. You'll have your research people in the booth with you, so you know, if somebody has set a career high for something, they're going to be quick to, or they'll say in his ear, like, hey, that was a career high for Joe Burrow, or that was his longest touchdown pass. So, yeah, there is, the higher you get, I mean, in some regards, it's easier because you do have more sources for it.
The stakes are higher.
The stakes are higher. So, you know, it should be easier because you want to get it right, because everybody's going to be, nobody's going to, very few people are going to get online and complain if I make a mistake on a ESPN Plus broadcast. Everybody's going to get online and complain if Jim Nantz gets a stat wrong on an NFL game. So, yeah, you do definitely want. But at the same time, you know, the college levels have steps too. You know, your D1, you know, your big D1s, like when Missouri came in for volleyball a few weeks ago, they had 4 or 5 sports information people there, and they would come up, hey, do you want to go over pronunciations? Here's a few notes, or they would hand me notes like during the broadcast. Hey,
that's just great having someone that would actually go over the pronunciations with you, so you're not like researching them and pulling them off whatever their their website is that offers that.
Yeah, usually I'll email them a few days in advance, which I need to do that for this weekend, and ask them for a roster with pronunciation. But even then, phonetics sometimes are very subjective, and how I might read a phonetical pronunciation might not be the way it was meant when it was written. So, it's great when somebody will actually sit down and go over with them. Or the best one is when they just record the person saying their name, because then it's like, I hear it. I hear what you're saying, and
from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, it makes it much easier. But yeah, research goes into a lot of these episodes of the Nerdcast Empire, and obviously this started, and I have the date here. The first episode uploaded on July 29th of 2023. It was recorded a few weeks before that because we got together and recorded the first few episodes all at the same time, and then kind of spaced them out over a few weeks. That was our nerdy music taste, so it was kind of fitting that music was the first episode we did, where we talked about, answered some questions about some of the bands we like. That went for the next couple weeks, and then we would record more. And obviously, it's evolved. We did pretty much everything on our podcast network, taped in advance, and then put on. And now we're doing it live on Twitch. And because of that, there's less backside editing because it's kind of the live experience. You're going to deal with kind of the ums and uhs and the imperfections of it because it's how it feels live. But it is a little more pressure because you got to be a little more prepared, because I can't just say, hey, let's stop the recording and go look something up. Or
we're live, pal.
We got to do it live. So there's a little bit more to that. But at the same time, it's been a lot of fun. I don't know what all you have written down, so I kind of want to just give you an open-ended question as far as like your thoughts on these first 100 episodes and kind of maybe some notes you have about this whole journey we've been on.
Yeah, so I kind of tackled it from the standpoint of, we have kind of our 4 major topics that we cover. What was it like when we first started, and kind of where am I today? How do I feel about it? How have I grown in each of these areas as far as my engagement with them and what I feel like I'm bringing to the podcast? Because I think when you talk about a podcast on average lasting 7 episodes, I think that's ultimately because when you go into it, if you're only worried about how many people are watching or listening, I think you're going to let yourself down really fast.
Yes.
I think you have to look at it from, how can I grow into this more, and ultimately put on a better product as the weeks and months go by. And if you don't, like with our case, we talk about anime, we talk music, we talk wrestling, gaming. If you're not into those things and actively engaging with them and enjoy talking about them, you're going to hate this really quickly. And when I jumped into it, as far as, say, gaming goes, I was playing World of Warcraft somewhat regularly, still pretty casually. I would play a new JRPG on occasion. I was playing kind of the new Star Ocean 2 remake at the time, the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. Going into anime, I wasn't really paying. I mean, I was watching shows, but it was kind of when I had time. It wasn't necessarily the new seasonal stuff. When you talk about the first episode being at the end of July, at that point in time, summer 2023. As of today, I've watched 1 show from summer of 2023, and it wasn't even the one that we randomly selected in the one anime episode. It was the new Kenshin. You go from that to now, or just over the course of the year, you look at this past winter, I watched 3 shows from the season. This past spring, I had 5 shows. Kaiju number 8, the time I was reincarnated as a Slime 3, Windbreaker, chilling in another world with level 2 super cheat powers. The banished former hero lives as he pleases. Into summer, another slate of 5 shows. Why does nobody remember me in this world? A journey through another world, raising kids while adventuring. A nobody's way up to an exploration hero. Quality assurance in another world. Slime season 3. And I'm looking at fall 2024. I'm looking at maybe 6 shows that I'll be watching, and I think it helps in feeling like you really have something to talk about that's current. On not even mentioning some of the old backlog stuff that I've been catching up with as well. The one area where I think things have been more or less the same is pro wrestling. It's something that, since it's so easy to keep up with because there are set scheduled times, that unless I'm going to watch it all on DVR or on demand later, I'm sitting down Monday nights and watching Raw. I'm sitting down Tuesday nights watching NXT. That's always been that way. I think maybe I watch it with more of a mindset of, hey, what can I talk about after I'm done watching this? But yeah, I where I am now, I think I'm much more engaged in all these topics, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I think that has made this whole process for everybody better, because the one thing I think people need to understand, we've mentioned this before, so I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. When we started this, I was the only one with any kind of professional broadcast experience. Yeah. Like, I was basically the pro because I've done broadcasting for so long, and I think it's one of the misconceptions of people is that you can just sit down and you can yap and it's going to be natural and it's going to work out. And, once you put the headset on, once you put the microphone in front of you, it is a different animal than just sitting in front of your TV and talking. That's a totally different situation. I think over the course of a year, everybody's gotten significantly better at it, and myself included, because obviously this is a little different than doing play-by-play of a sporting event. I kind of steer the ship. I try to move it around and keep the things moving, and of course also engineer the broadcast.
Yeah.
So there's all of those things as well, and I think that's the biggest difference to me is when those first episodes came out, it took me a long time to edit them because there were a lot of uhs and ums, because nobody was really certain of themselves because it was a new thing, and they're still there, but they're fewer and farther between, even without me editing them out now, because everybody kind of understands how to make their points and get out without kind of having those long, pregnant pauses in their thought process. So that's made, I think, a more enjoyable listen. I think having the show be recognized by people, whether it's comments on YouTube, people in the live chat, bands reaching out to us on social media, bands leaving you notes when you order albums that they enjoy the podcast. That is kind of another thing that gives everybody a little energy for this project. Because like you said, and I think that's the number one thing, as we kind of transition maybe into advice for people that are sitting there thinking, I've been wanting to do this. Number one is 100% don't look at your numbers. Now, you probably don't want to be doing this for nobody. Like, if you're not doing it for anybody, maybe you need to kind of switch it up. Our numbers aren't like immense. We're grateful for everybody that tunes into us. But, on average, there's probably, on a good episode, 30 or 40 people that listen to it. And that's completely fine. Maybe it never gets above 30 or 40 people listening to it. Maybe someday something happens and it goes viral and we make it big and then a bunch of people listen to it. But when you start doing this, it has to be with the understanding that you're going to do it to very few people to start. And that has to be okay. You have to be more interested in the doing rather than, oh man, I'm going to get monetized and we're still waiting to get monetized on Twitch.
Yeah.
It's a process. And the problem is, just like every other walk of life, is you will see the examples of these content creators that kind of blow up out of nowhere and you think, that's me. I'm the next Sea-Dog VA. I'm the next Iron Mouse. I'm the, one of these people that are just going to...
And were they even out of nowhere?
And they weren't, because they definitely came... But when people pop in...
You assume that when you discover somebody is when everybody discovered that person.
Correct. It's not when, Iron Mouse becomes the most subscribed to Twitch streamer and you just think, I've never heard of Iron Mouse. Wow, that's crazy. And Iron Mouse obviously has been grinding away for a long time, as has Connor. They have put in the long hours. They have streamed to very few people along the way, and now they're obviously where they are. But that's not normal. There are so many other Twitch streamers I watch that stream to 50 to 100 people, and they're super excited about those 50 to 100 people. We would be if we had 50 to 100 people consistently watching us. We'd be super excited too. So if you're thinking about getting into it, do it for the content, do it for the exercise, don't do it for the numbers, because you're going to be disappointed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it would be the equivalent of you deciding you're going to go jogging every day, but you're only worried about how quickly you run a mile. You can look at the numbers, but that's just a small percentage of the actual benefit you're getting out of doing it. It's potentially weight loss. It's the increased cardiovascular health. There are all these other things that are really worthwhile that you're getting from the process that maybe you're overlooking. And I think with this podcast, it's similar to that. It's, over the course of doing this, I've started creating videos for YouTube, something I always kind of thought would be neat to try, and here I am doing it. I've created some shorts that I still need to upload, but it's just finding new things to engage with your hobbies that I think is at the very least half of why you do this.
And I think that's another point to make if you're on the fence, if you're thinking, hey, I want to do this. The next thing is to do it. Like, it's probably going to be bad because that's where everybody starts. It's probably not good. But don't be afraid to suck. Like, don't be afraid to be bad and just do it. Because we have talked, and I speak of we as Mike and Chris and I talked for a long time. Hey, we go to a convention and come back thinking we got to do this really cool thing. And then we wouldn't do this really cool thing. And at some point it just became, we have to do this because we're not getting any younger. And at some point we're going to run out of time, or life is going to just throw things in our way where we just can't.
Well, I think the thing we never really, we didn't really look at it in the right way. Because obviously as tennis coaches, high school tennis coaches, we see that player who waits until their senior year to play. That's how we were handling this. We were like, yeah, we'll eventually do that. Yeah, we'll eventually do that. We could have started this in, comparably our freshman year of being into this stuff, and we didn't. We just put it off, and because of that, your expectations have to be tempered. We can't expect the kind of results that someone doing this 8 years is getting. It's just not reasonable.
But the other side of that too is don't wait. Like, don't get started, because the sooner you get started, the sooner you get to 8 years, and then you can have results for somebody who's been in it 8 years.
Just like that first time tennis player, and kind of to your point, you have to be okay with, I can't hit a forehand. That's streaming to no viewers. That's the same thing. It's okay. Once I learn the forehand, we're going to move on to something else. It's a process, and it, like everything else, it takes time.
And I think there's a couple things that can be overwhelming when you're looking at getting into this. One is advice, because everybody's got their thought process about how you need to do it, and you need to stick to one topic, or you need to have a broader audience so that you can bring in more people from a lot of places, or you have to stream every day or twice a week, or just do it. Like, just find something you want to talk about and do it when you're first starting out. And as you get into it, because again, I mean, we were once a week to start out with, and it was recorded. Now we're twice a week live, generally.
Yeah.
You're going to find your thing, whether it's your format, like our music show, or the correct frequency of streaming. But if you can only do it every other week, do it every other week. Yeah. If you can do it once a month, do it once a month. Obviously, the more regular you are about when you do it, the more likely you're going to have audience finding you and coming back. But don't let the fact you can't do it every day or every week deter you from starting it, because that's the way that you basically talk yourself into not doing it at all.
You never get better that way.
Yeah.
Even once every 2 weeks, you're still building that skill set.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think people get intimidated by is the technology of it. Now, I will admit, we've got a really good setup. We've got great microphones. We've got the Rodecaster Pro 2, which is an amazing device that does just insane things. We've got a great MacBook that we stream through. We've got, I don't want to say the best of the best, because there's always a higher level of technology out there, but we've got some pretty good tech. You don't need any of that tech. You could use the microphone on your computer. You could use a little headset mic. There's so much consumer level audio equipment out there now, and almost every day a company like Rode, or trying to think of some of the other companies that are out there.
Elgato has everything, yeah.
Like, there are so many of these companies. Obviously they're giving you the high-end stuff, but they're also giving you like the consumer-end stuff that's like a couple $100, and you can basically get everything you need to start a podcast. So don't let, you see your favorite, content creator with the SM7B mics and the fancy mixer boards and the cameras, full camera setups, and 4K streams, and you think, well, I can't do that, so I'm not doing it. No, like, You can build to that eventually.
They could still do what they do on a lot less expensive setup.
Yeah,
basically.
And they probably did to start with. So don't let the tech side of it intimidate you either.
Well, I think probably the lockdown made a lot of this stuff more attainable, because it was needed to facilitate work from home for thousands of employees.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's out there, and almost every month one of these companies releases something new that helps you. I mean, the new Stream Decks have like the mic inputs in the back of them, and you can
like an interface too.
Yeah, so it's again, you can spend as much money as you want on these, but you can also get by with a lot less. And check with some of these websites for used equipment, like Guitar Center and some of those sites have used audio equipment you can get, so you can get good stuff for less money, or eBay even.
Just wait till your local music store goes out of business and get everything on a deep discount.
That's unfortunately depressingly correct. But yeah,
that was cold.
But there's a lot of great YouTube videos about affordable tech in the audio space and video space. If you want to do the video thing, we don't do the video thing. We could, but it's we don't have to. Right now we're just kind of happy doing the audio thing, and someday maybe we'll.
I think sometimes you have to have those next steps in the distance to know that where we are now, we can still grow and evolve. And I think that's when we get into now we're into year 2. Those we have that list of things. How do we keep taking this to the next level? And we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. So it's been a really fun journey, and I'm really excited to see where it continues to go. And it's been fun to kind of watch everybody develop. I mean, it is very much, you talk about our tennis coaching, which we finished up our season today. It is very much the same as that I've watched this podcast and watched everybody involved with it evolve and grow over the course of a little over a year. And it makes you excited to see what we can do next and where everybody's going to go and what's that next really cool thing. And the thing I want to encourage anybody who's out there listening and you've made it to the hour mark of this podcast, if you got things you'd like to see us do, send us a message. Let us know. Like, it would be really cool to do some of the things. There are lots of ideas we have, but we always want to hear what our listeners want us to do too.
And join us live, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, if you get in the chat and chat with us, we can chat it up live on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire, where we are.
When you talk too about the growth as far as our skills in doing the live podcasting part of it, I think there are skills on the other side of it that can't go unnoticed too. It's being able to say, hey, here's the format we want to follow. Here's how we build, my spreadsheet of endless new release music. It's all of those things that just kind of allow us to follow a format.
Yeah, for sure. And some of that comes from, like I said, the broadcasting stuff and doing the prep for these games. There's a format to it. There's for these soccer matches, about building these boards and doing the research and putting that all together and doing it a couple days in advance. You have time to go over it and try to pick out the key players. You're going to need to call their name a lot. For basketball, it involves a chain of emails where I send them key storylines and talk about key points, and then we bounce back and forth. And, you do all this stuff in advance so that the broadcast, the actual sitting down and doing the podcast part is the easy part of what we do. If you've done the work in advance, this is easy. We talk about it with tennis again, bringing that up again. Practice should be hard and matches should be easy if you do it right.
I can't teach you a forehand in the middle of the match.
No.
It's just not going to happen.
No, it doesn't work that way. So
just get your racket down.
Yes, that is the whole secret to life, basically. But it's been a wild ride. Anything else you have to mention on the 100th episode?
No, I think that's about it. I'm excited to see where the fall season goes and what else we find to talk about.
And again, join us live. Obviously, we're happy for people to join us on the VODs as well. It's been a lot of fun. Maybe in the next year, maybe we start looking at some guest appearances if we can find some people that are interested or potentially have some things they want to talk about. We are always happy to have some guests involved and lots of really cool stuff. So we're really excited to get to 100 episodes, and we're incredibly grateful to Stove Lake Media. We're incredibly grateful to everyone who has listened to even one episode.
We've just scratched the surface.
We have, and I'm excited to see where it goes, and we're going to continue to plod ahead a little bit at a time, baby steps, and try to do some more really cool things in the future, and hopefully you'll be along for the ride, everybody that's out there who has joined us. We're incredibly grateful for you, and can't wait to see what the next 100 episodes looks like, starting with tonight's episode number 101, which we are now bringing to a close here on the Nerdcast Empire. It's been another really good episode of the Nerdcast Empire. Talked a little anime, talked a little pro wrestling, and again, kind of a reflection on where we have come for the first 100 episodes. A reminder, coming up Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, it's another episode of Music Weekly with the music of September the 20th. Looks like a really great week, so you definitely want to tune in live, 7 o'clock Eastern, twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Really excited for this upcoming week. Again, next week, TBA, we'll let you know. We may have a week off from the midweek podcast. We'll have to figure out what the schedule will be, and we'll go from there. Again, big thanks to Stoveleg Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to the entire crew for their work on the podcast. And here's to another 100 episodes or more of the Nerdcast Empire. So, for Mike and everybody else involved with the Nerdcast Empire, I am Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.